A colleague of mine, he called me and he said, Niels, I read in one of your tutorials I downloaded from your website that I said there, in my experience, Zero Defects attitude results in 50% less defects almost overnight. Interesting. Can you explain my team? So we set up a web meeting and I explained the team. Then I thought, well, if this is interesting for this guy and for his team, maybe it's also interesting for other people. So this year I go to many conferences, especially testing conferences, where I try to explain about zero defects. Although we should tell developers, because they inject the defects. Testers don't do they? So, do we deliver zero defect software? Who does? Who does not? Okay, that's why I'm here, sorry. How many defects are acceptable? Thank you. 0. Do your requirements specify the number of defects you are supposed to deliver? Do they? Why do you deliver them? Everybody is working hard to fulfill the requirements. It's not required, and you deliver defects. And if they are required, do you check that you really made them? Or do you use the testers to tell you you're successful in delivering the required number of defects? How much time is spent in putting the defects in? And how much time is spent in trying to find and fix them where we know you won't even find them all? Any idea? 50-50? Yeah? I was at a conference where after me came a guy from Microsoft and he enthusiastically said, halfway the project we have code complete. And then we started debugging. So it was about 50-50. And a month later I was at the Philips conference in Holland and I heard the same story. Injecting of defects, trying to find and fix them. They called it a little bit differently, but that was actually what they were doing. And then, those people who check other people's stuff, sometimes you find an issue. Some other time, do you find the same kind of issue? If yes, why didn't you tell the developer that he injected this issue and that he shouldn't do it anymore? We keep repeating the same thing. So, can we do something about that? Yeah? How much time do you guys spend on defect prevention? More than 0 hours per week? Everybody? Or not? Who is not working on prevention? Okay, at least some honest people. Before you stopping thinking, because many people stop thinking if I start talking about zero defects because they say, you're nuts, you're coming from Mars, that's impossible, so why even think about it? No? Let me try to explain what I mean with zero defects. If we start doing something and we're not yet good at it, we can learn, so this is the learning curve. And the learning curve goes to the level of acceptable defect injection. Yeah? So if the quality level is we accept about 13 errors per 1,000 lines of code, then we will produce, that's our asymptote, so we gradually move towards 13 errors per 1,000 lines of code. Yeah? Asymptote means that's the level we will never reach, but we try to get there. And when you are at the acceptable level, we are done, we did a good job. So the only way ever to get to zero defects is having it as your target. I know it's hard. Yeah, people make mistakes, we are people, so if we do something, we are in the process of injecting defects. We know that, but the customer shouldn't find out. When Phil Crosby, who started with Zero Defects in the 60s, he started this errors dropped almost instantly by about half. I did it in a project very purposely. Errors dropped immediately by 50% at least. It's not that they were made and repaired. No, they were not injected anymore, just by a change in attitude. Crosby says, if your acceptable quality is more than 0, it means that your organization has settled on a level of incompetence. Causing a hassle people have to live with. Your users have to live with this hassle. So another word for zero defects is no hassle. Are the projects you give to your users of your software, do you cause no hassle at all? Who does? Or do you cause some hassle? Yeah. If you buy some stuff and you start using it, do you think it's normal that you're hassled a little bit? If you buy a car, you find it normal that some things don't work? Who finds that normal? Who doesn't find that normal? Thank you. Why do you don't expect it from somebody else delivering something to you, and you happily deliver all the issues? Come on, guys. So Crosby, read his book. It cost only 10 euros. I gave it to the CEO of a company, and the whole culture in the company changed overnight. I gave it as homework the first day I came in that company, and the next week I said, you've read it. I gave him homework. He read it. Whole culture changed. Crosby says, conformance to requirements is quality, obtained through prevention, performance standard is zero defects, and we calculate the price of non-conformance, which is huge, up to the cost of a bad name at your customers. His organization, after he died, added the 5th absolute of quality. They said the purpose is customer success. I agree completely. I don't like so much what they added to that. Is that here? No, not customer satisfaction, but that was more an answer to what people used to think quality is customer satisfaction. It is, but only if it is also customer success. So, you may remember this picture from my previous talk. Yeah, my ultimate goal of what we do, delivering what the customer needs, which usually is not what he says, at the time he needs it, which usually is earlier or later than he says, to be satisfied than he wants to pay, and to be more successful than he was before. If he's not successful, he cannot pay. If he's not more successful, why would he pay? About prevention. Who heard about root cause analysis? Okay. Well, I introduced root cause analysis at some company, and for some strange reason they had a special database where they put all their bugs in. I don't know why, but they apparently loved their bugs so much they put them in databases. And if you put them in databases, you have to create them, otherwise there's nothing to put in the database. So I suggested, let's put a box in this Bugzilla system where we put the root cause and the root solution. And a few years later I came back and I saw in this database not the root cause, but the cause of the defect and the solution of the defect. So apparently they didn't know the difference between the cause of a defect and the root cause of a defect. Who knows the difference? Who doesn't? Okay, so there's reason to go on. What's the root cause? The cause is the error that caused the defect. It's not a bug. A bug is something that creeps in your code and you can't do anything about it. No, we make errors, we inject defects. Yeah? And our tendencies to create defects make us do this. That's the cause. Sorry, that's not true. The cause is the error that's there and that causes the software to malfunction. The root cause is what caused us to make this error. And only if we go to the root cause we can think what we can do about ourselves. Never ever to inject this defect anymore. That's a learning. So it's good to see the difference. The cause of the defect is the error that makes the software to malfunction. The root cause is what caused us to introduce this error. So, who does regularly root cause analysis? Who does not? There's work to do. Because it means you're going to repeat the same things over and over again. And remember, Einstein and Benjamin Franklin, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Without proper root cause analysis, we are doomed to repeat the same problems. So, apparently you love it. Do you love to inject defects? Yeah, now some people love defects and love to debug. Now, who loves to debug? Okay. Now, you better make sure I never talk to your boss. Because if I explain him that debug is a dirty word that can be stretched from the dictionary and that we can talk about it how to do that, he suddenly realized, why am I paying my people to create bugs that are not required? Now, if you still like to make bugs and debug, and your boss doesn't get paid for it, therefore he cannot pay for it, we have a special word for that. We call that a hobby, if you still like it. And hobbies you can do at home in the weekend. Huh? So some examples. We are not perfect, but the customer shouldn't find out. Of course he finds out, and he's also not perfect, but I like to have very concise mantras. So one of the techniques is, let me ask, who is coding? Who is designing? Okay. Who designs more time than he spends coding? Okay, there's some work to do. That's why you produce all these errors. Okay, so my suggestion is, first we design, then we review the design until we are happy. Only then we are allowed to touch the code and create code. Then we review the code, and you know what the result is? Any tester doesn't find anything anymore. You don't have to believe this. Maybe I didn't believe it before I was born, but if you do this, that's what's going to happen. And one of the mantras I use for testing is no questions, no issues. If the tester has one question for the developer, if the tester finds any issue, failed, back. And not back to repair the code, go back, throw away the code, go back to your design, start all over again. That's a technique that was developed in the 60s and 70s, and they called it the clean room approach to software development. Does anybody remember that? Clean room? That's a long time ago. They produced routinely, within budget, at a factor 10 less defects than you are doing. Lower cost, higher quality. No band-aid, no repair, that's too costly. No scars in my code. And if any tester says one question, one issue, back, failed, and you have to start all over again by design, within a very short time, developers produce zero defects code. Is that a theory? No, it's practice. And one of the techniques I use is what I call the design log. I see if people make any document before they write code, it's I'm going to do this and this and this and this. Now, how do you know that's the right stuff? How do you know it's the best way to do it? How do you know it's the best, most efficient way to do it? So what I have, the concept of the design log, at the top of a chapter it says this is what we want to achieve, the bottom says this is how we think we're going to do it, and in between we have the reasoning, the questioning, and possible solutions, and how we decide which solution to use. Does that take much work? It doesn't. And it saves a lot of work. So I was in Dublin from time to time. There is a guy, James, in Dublin, who asked me from time to time to help him when he is working with a team. And he said, Niels, can you help us because there is a team who doesn't know the goal of their project. so let's have a session. So I went to Dublin, and we sat the whole day, and at the end of the day, we had a clear picture of what they should deliver at the first sprint anyway. Usually that takes some time. But then they said, well, this Thursday happens to be our pub day, our monthly pub day. So we went to the pub, had a beer and some food, and then James came to me and James said, Niels, here's Louise. Louise, tell your story. And he left. So Louise started. She said, my team was coding and testing, testing, because we had to deliver in 7 days. Does that happen to you from time to time? You have to deliver in 7 days, coding and testing, coding and testing. She said, then James came and he said, stop coding, go back to your design. To design? We don't have time, we have to deliver in 7 days, we have to code. You go back to your design. And apparently in this company he came at a level that he could say, you stop coding, you go back to your design. So she said, I looked at the design. Usually that means reproducing the design from what you're coding. Anyway, she did that. She said, within half an hour we found the flaw. We did it properly. We cleaned up the mess we introduced by coding, testing, coding, testing, coding, testing. Yeah, let me give you some picture, because this is what I found years ago on the internet as the software development process, which is very bad. Yeah. Found the problem, corrected it, cleaned up the mess we created, and we were done in less than 7 days. Thank you, she said. So I made a web page of this. You can find it on my website. I sent an email to James. I said, James, can you ask Louise that what I thought she told me is correct? After a few beers, you know. He said, well, actually, it's correct. And he went to Louise. Yes, it's correct. But the story was even more interesting. He said, actually, they had to deliver 2 modules. Or was that? Yes. Actually, there were 2 modules. And one they did this way, and the other one they did their old way. The first one simply worked. The second one didn't. He said the story is even more interesting. Because he told her, go back to the design. Because now I heard the story from his side. He said, she did the design, and then he said to her, now we're going to review it. If you're going to review it, I should make my design differently. No, he said, you did your best, you made your design, let's see what happens. So a few people came, and yeah, you know, all those people who have no education in reviewing, they don't find hardly anything. So just like if you review and you didn't have education in review, you don't find anything, maybe a typo or whatever. So she cleaned up a little bit, and then they had the final review. But he said, at the final review, another guy came in who wasn't in the first review, and based on his insight and his explanation, they changed the whole design. Because he could indicate that they would get into trouble later. And that was the design they eventually coded and simply worked. Now, many software people have no education in what design is. I happen to be an electronics engineer, so we design things, and if we build them, they have to work. Yeah, because we can't do it a second time, that's way too expensive. So, just an example. It doesn't mean a design should look like this, and you don't have to read it. It's just, this is a state machine, for those who recognize. So, I told the developers in another company, I told them, shouldn't we design? Because I said, can we review your software? And the guy sent me code. I said, I can look at your code, but what's the point? The moment we will check your design, your code will change anyway, so why should I waste my time on code that's going to change anyway? Yeah, but he had trouble in understanding what I meant by design, because nobody ever told him, who's in software? Who's an engineer, a trained engineer? You see? That's the problem. I'm trying to teach you some engineering. Yeah? Our mind and our eyes can oversee only a certain angle. How many lines of code do fit in this angle? And how much design fits in the same angle at the higher level? Here you can see things that I cannot see in code. Of course, you young guys, I'm way too old, you see everything in code, all the structure immediately, do you? So, just as an example, a state machine. An interface between some controller and some user interface to be bought in Switzerland. And it was written in 47 pages. Some system engineer architect hired for this. He made 47 pages with diagrams, with arrows, full of errors because it was cut and paste and not editing well. So nobody reads a document from 47 pages with all this bullshit. So I put the same 47 pages on one picture. Discussed it in Dublin with the engineers, then went to Switzerland, discussed it with the supplier, and then in the train back home, I thought, well, we agreed on this, and now in the train, 3 hours train, I made this picture. Just to check what I thought we discussed with the Swiss guys, how to implement that as a suggestion to the implementers to implement, and to see all the structure. If you see such a structure in blocks, and you would see it in code, would you ever in code see the same structure? And where that's complete, and when that's correct? So, one example, if you don't know what design is, design actually is a craft. If I start a design, I don't even know what will come out of it. But you can make a design in 47 pages that nobody understands, nobody can follow, no value. Or you can make a picture. A picture says more than 1,000 words. Yeah. Just a few examples. If I have time, just another example. Sprint planning. I was in a Scrum meeting, sprint planning meeting, and they were discussing and blah, 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 what they're going to do. I said, guys, what's the measure of success? At the end of the sprint, when can we declare we were successful? And they said, what a strange question. We are agile, we are doing Scrum, we are efficient. Yeah, we are delivering working software. I said, software always works. You switch on the computer and it works. Yeah, whether that's the right thing is a whole other story. So, can we declare an easy measurement of success? And I said it before, I suggested, because of this, users are not waiting for software. They need improved performance of what they are doing. Yeah? Software doesn't create value. Hopefully our software creates the conditions for the users to create their value. That's what we are after. And whether that's software or cardboard cards or whatever, they couldn't care less. Only if they work better, nicer, happier than before our project. What's that? That's the wrong button, I suppose. So, again here I suggested, how about if you demo, remember my story about the demo yesterday, if you demo, no questions, no issues. And I showed them the same picture I showed you yesterday. If we deliver, we don't demo, but we give it to them, handcuffed on the back, zip, and observe what's going to happen. So I suggested this, and the first reaction to that was, that's impossible. How do these stakeholders we are going to demo to know what we are going to deliver? I said, that's your problem. I only have a simple requirement. If they have one question, or find one issue, we failed. And if there's no question, no issue, we're successful. So, and I gave a few hints. Do you never give a release note? The project of all the Scrum teams deliver a release note. I said, no, this is your team, your success. What do you have to do so that you are successful? Oh, maybe we have to make our own release note. And another guy said, maybe halfway the sprint we ask somebody and see what happens if we give it to him. I said, okay, we are going in the right direction. So the demo happened. 2 weeks later. Now, what they actually had to do, there was a database, and if 2 users open the same record in the database, and one changes the record, and the other one wants to change the record, it should say, it's already changed. What do you want to do? Now, of course, we can discuss, why do we need a Scrum team of 10 people to spend 2 weeks to implement that functionality? But that's another story. Yeah. So let's focus on this demo. So the team was in Manchester and the stakeholders were in Birmingham in the UK. So we demoed through the phone and shared screen. The demo guy, he stole the telephone, he said to the guys, can you take the mouse? Now, through the telephone, I felt the thrill of excitement, because this project, we are agile, we are doing Scrum, in 2 years they hadn't delivered anything, only demo. Yeah? So I felt the thrill of excitement of these guys, because the first time in 2 years they were allowed to touch the mouse of the system. Now, after a while, we saw the cursor moving on the screen. Okay, you found the mouse. Yeah. So, and then he said, can you open that record and change something? And he opened in his machine the same record, changed it, saved it, and then, now save it, he said. And they got the message. It's already changed, what do you want to do? The interesting thing was, no question, no issue. On all the demos before, they got technical increments, they stakeholders, not value for them, for the business. So that's boring. They had to be there because we are agile. And therefore, they had to be there and see these boring technical increments that didn't create real value. So if you get boring demos, you start asking boring questions. Like, why is this button yellow? And why is this text not blah, blah, blah? Yeah. And then the designers start, new requirements. The button must be yellow. Yeah. So they kind of succeeded. At least I said, congratulations, you succeeded, because there was no question and no issue. Whether it really was a success, well, we should improve by small steps, not ask too much at the first time. This one, this is in this project, because they never delivered in 2 years. And I found, they asked me, can you make these Scrum teams much more efficient? Which we did. But then I quickly realized that the stuff we are feeding them was not the right stuff. So what's the point in making them more efficient if they're doing the wrong things? So I said, architect, can I come with you, talk with you, and can we go to the customers and have some talk with the customer? So with the architect, I went to the customer. And when the architect was not there, I was talking alone with this customer. He said, you know, Niels, we are not going to use this system. It doesn't do what we need. Yeah? 70 people working already for 2 years and probably another 2 years, which they actually did. All those lemmings running to the abyss, you see? Yeah. So this is what I left the project, because management was not interested in improving this. They said, we have these 2,000 requirements, or 4,000, whatever. We finished 2 in 2 years. The whole project should have been in 1 year. We finished 2,000 requirements in 2 years. So can you make sure that we finish the other 2,000 in a few months? So I left the project, but not without giving them some advice. And this was my suggestion. How about this? What we deliver every 2 weeks will be used by the appropriate users immediately, within 1 week, not making them less efficient than before. Yeah? If you first have Windows 7 and then you get Windows Vista, your efficiency goes down. And now, fortunately, they don't let us pay for Windows 10 because it's just the same as 7 with another color. So it's a very weak requirement. Not less efficient. Of course, they should be more efficient. If a delivery isn't used immediately, we analyze why, close the gap so that it will start being used immediately. because we need feedback, and if they don't use it, we don't get feedback with what we did wrong. The proof of the pudding is when it is eaten and found tasty not by us, but by them. The users determine success and whether they want to pay us. Thank you. Yeah, we don't have to tell them, but I work no cure, no pay. If my customers tell me this didn't have value, I have nothing to say. So I try to convey that same as an attitude, at least. If they think, yes, this is successful, then they can pay us. If not, we don't even want their money. So I suggested these things to management, and they said, well, we are just going to do these requirements because they signed it with blood, and therefore they have to pay anyway. Yeah, whether they use it or not, that's not my problem, said the project manager. So I say, you don't have to listen to my advice. Who am I to tell you what to do? But if you don't use my advice, what's the point in spending your company's money on me? So I left. And I have a spy in the project. So many months later, he said, gradually they're going to follow your advice. And gradually they're really talking with the customer. And 2 years later, they finished the project. And did implement every whim the customer asked them at a very high cost for the supplier. Anyway, so just as a last one, again, James, he showed me another example. Yeah, one team said the requirement specifications were trashed out with the product management. So product management tells this team what to do, and they went back to the product management and said, what is it really that you mean? Yeah? And they spent time on that. Yeah? Then they did technical analysis, and they did the detailed design for the first delivery. Design, remember? And James told me what happened after the first delivery. He asked it, and Adrian said it's exactly as expected, which is absolutely unprecedented for the first delivery. The initial legwork had really paid off. So, who does the first thing the customer asked, or the product owner? Yeah? We don't have to develop the solution first. First, we have to develop the problem, because what the customer asks probably is not what he needs. And then we can analyze it and design it, and if you do that properly, it simply works and even does the right thing, which is part of no hassle. Some techniques shown: design, drawing, design log, review, no questions, no issues. A zero defects attitude makes an immediate difference. If you don't believe it, I didn't believe it before I tried it, but I found if I tried it as an attitude, the defect injection dropped immediately. So even if you don't believe it, I think you should try it to see what happens. Yeah? So that was my first slide. Better quality costs less. That's my message. Thank you.